So you are able to see the screen, right?
Yes, sir.
So anyway, so last class, I think last week, okay, so we have started our seismic hazard, the analysis. So I have explained you, why do we require this hazard analysis, the main problems, what we find is, we have to design the structures which has to be safe in future. That is the most, the difficult thing, because the future comes into picture, okay. So that's what we told you. So nowadays, the main philosophy is, what is the design value for Bombay or Chennai or whatever. So you can take whatever design value you like, okay, but you know your risk level and you cover the risk with insurance. So that is the design concept, okay. So that is how the designs are there. So that's what we told. So now we have said DSHA, PSHA. So DSHA is already I told you. So we don't worry about the occurrence of earthquakes, okay. So in olden days, say if you see 50-60 years back or something, people were not sure about how the earthquakes occur, and then so many other things, okay. So they are not known. So in those days, people used to take simply one magnitude, one distance. They used to assume magnitude and distance as deterministic kind of thing, okay. And then you substitute in some GMP or whatever. So GMP has some kind of error, okay, because it is a normal log normal and other things. So we used to take mean m plus sigma, m plus 1.65 times sigma, depending on the importance of the structure, 95 percentile, 84, all those kinds of concepts was there. But now more information is there. So now the trend is, so any country, say anywhere in the world, if you say, people are doing probabilistic seismic hazard analysis only. So here the magnitude and distance is there. So they are considered as random variables, and then we try to do all the probabilistic calculations. So last week, I think I have told you the important what you can say, the design, the probability things we have defined, definitions of probability, definition of random variable, but it was like more or less a brief kind of thing I have given you, okay. So if you want to know more about these things, so so we have a separate course, is a probability course running this semester. That may be fine. Maybe reliability course is there's the next sem, so you will understand the probability theory in great detail, okay. So finally, so what we said was, you have to use the total probability theorem and all those uncertainties, and you will get the this one, okay. So the basic equation was, I think, so we have said already, okay. So the total probability theorem, I think we have discussed. Where is that? Yes. So we have seen all those things, and finally, say, so I think our thing was here somewhere here. Uh, so Poisson process, everything we have seen, and finally, this is the total probability theorem, okay. So now here, so using the total probability theorem, say, so we have the uncertainty. So magnitude and distance, say, both of them are the uncertain kind of thing. So using the total probability theorem, so you have to find out these three. So three probabilities are there. One is the distance, one is magnitude, and another one is related to the ground motion, GMP, that is a normal distribution or whatever. So these three you have to find out, and you have to do all the combinations, because now our sample space is a two-dimensional sample space where you have magnitude and distance. So you have to find out probability of my ground motion exceeding 0.1 g, probability of my ground motion exceeding this 0.2 g, 1 g, 5 g, you followed it. You have to get all these numbers. So this is the basic the seismic hazard analysis fundamental equation, okay. So this comes from a total probability theorem, and then so this is the one. So now last class we were discussing how to estimate these probabilities, probability distribution function for distance, then magnitude, and then you see these three. This is very easy, that you can estimate from the normal distribution, but these two, say, how do we estimate? So that is what we were discussing in our last class. So what we said was, so this distance thing, say, it is a straightforward and it is very easy. So in the olden days, okay, or not only in the olden days, now also, okay, suppose if you don't have any fault map, if you don't have any information around your site, say, Now, of course, fault maps are there, but as already I told you, there are many places in India where we don't have good information on the faults at all. So what do we do? So now, like I want to estimate, like let's say at this site, okay, some Chennai or something. I don't know any information around the Chennai. I don't know any faults. Nothing is known to me. So what do we do? Yeah, what is that we have to do? What did we told in the last class? If I don't have any information, say around my site, so where earthquake will occur?
Anywhere around 100-kilometer radius.
100 kilometer is. So this 100-kilometer concept comes from the damages. Suppose if you are in Himalayas, say. Now what you should do? 100 kilometer you should use, or what is that you will try to do? Suppose if 8 magnitude or 8.5 occurs in Himalayas, say. Now what happens to Delhi? So Delhi is at a distance of 300 kilometers. So now 8.5 occurs. Say now what will happen to Delhi? You will see any damages or no damage will be seen. It's in Himalayas, say, like if the magnitude, the Himalayas means you can have 8.5, 9 magnitude also which can occur. So what should be your distant region, say, what should be your, whether you will take 100 or what is that you will try to do?
It should be more than 100.
So if it is a Delhi city, say, so now you have to consider 300 kilometer or maybe 500 kilometers also. Okay, that much region you have to take. Now since you don't have any information on the fault, so assumption is earthquake can occur anywhere around the site actually. So earthquake can occur here, here, here. So the entire region, say, around your site is entirely seismic. So in that cases, you can use this type of circular thing and area of a circle. So this is the probability distribution function, say, you can find out using this model. This was the old thing. Of course, now also if you don't have any information, that is the easiest way to do. So these are how the distances, you see, they look like actual. Okay, so this is a distribution, and this is a density function, and this is the distribution function basically. Okay, so this is how you will obtain. But nowadays, as already I told you, we have nice information on the faults. Of course, not so hi-fi, but at least we are having some information. So if you are having a fault which is perfectly perpendicular to my site, say, okay, exactly perpendicular, so analytically you can express. Okay, so like you can find out that Pythagoras theorem or whatever, and you can do, and you can find out. And the fault is also, you see, a linear fault. It is just like a straight line. You can do closed form actually. Okay, the closed form solution means you have an expression. So the density function is r by 50. You can write in express in terms of these type of variables. Okay, so this is how you see the density function looks like, and then the distribution function. But nowadays, what is the easiest way? See, now, as I already showed you, right? For Ahmedabad or for any faults in India, are the faults are perfectly straight lines?
They're curved.
They are all curves actually. So if the fault is curved, then how do we construct the density function? See, linear fault means maybe you can write some equation and analytically you see like this, and then we can derive. But if the faults are highly curved, or and of course fault is not a line, right? So in the fault map, although we may be showing a fault as a line, but it may also have some width and rupture and other things also will be there, or the faults also may be curved also. So what is the easiest way to do? How do we estimate distance? What did we say in the last class?
You divide it into smaller elements.
Yeah, so it is like your finite element kind of a thing. So if you know the faults, you divide it into small thing, like 1 lakh, 2 lakh, or 5 lakh pieces. So from each piece you find out the distance. So you will be having 5 lakh distances. You construct a histogram actually. This is how, and then you not divide by 5 lakh, how many number of points is there. So automatically you will get the probability density function. So this is the easiest way to construct a probability density function for a distance if you know the fault information. If you don't know anything, use that circular source model. If you have no information, if you know the fault information, say, you can construct in this way. It is a very, very easy. You can do for aerial source or volume, say, whatever you want to do, you follow, right? You can easily construct, you see, by this concept. Okay, so volume also, like if sometimes you see Faults, they are like dip angle, you remember. So that entire region is there. So fault is not a straight line, it is a aerial, or it may be a volume also may come into picture. Okay, later on I will show you some figures also. So then you divide them into equal this one, and you more number of pieces you do 1 lakh or 5 lakh or something, you construct histogram. Okay, so histograms I hope all of you know, and then you normalize, so that itself will give you the probability density function itself. So this way, you can find out the density function for the distance. Okay, it's very easy and straightforward. And among the three probabilities, magnitude, distance, and the first GMP is so distance is very easy, no assumption. So we are not assuming anything. Whatever the fault shape is, you are getting those things numerically. So suppose if somebody asks you, so what type of random variable is a distance, say, we don't say anything actually. Okay, so the random variable for distance, it is not exponential, it is not anything. It is just something like, you see, a non-parametric kind of a thing. So it depends on the orientation and all other things itself. So we don't assume anything. Numerically, you compute the distance itself. Okay, that is how we try to do. And now coming to the maximum, these magnitudes. So this is the most difficult thing. Okay, the challenge essentially. And the magnitude is the most complicated probability density compared to all of them. Another headache is how to estimate this max. So this is the most the difficult portion, or very problem. That is a maximum magnitude. Like you say, what is the maximum magnitude which can occur in future? Okay, so because we are all talking although we are in the present, but our building has to be safe in the future. So now the question comes, of course we want a future ground motion also, but we also want what is going to be the future maximum magnitude which can occur. So this is the most difficult thing itself. So there are some guidelines are there, like this max say. So there are some the equations are there. I told you. Suppose if I have a fault which is 1 kilometer long, the length is only 1 kilometer, say. Now this fault can produce 8 magnitude, 1 kilometer long fault? No, so it cannot produce 8. Suppose if I have fault of 1,000 kilometers, say, so then there is a chance of getting 8 magnitude. So there are some empirical relations are there, like based on the length of the fault, or rupture area, say, because we know the width, and the fault is not a line, it is a aerial kind of a thing, or volumetric thing also. So there are some thumb rules and some the guidelines are there. But nowadays, of course, like for example, say, okay, it has happened in many cases. Like if you see this Ahmedabad itself, say, okay, so if you see this Ahmedabad, this city, now among this, which is the longest fault? Can you see here around Ahmedabad? Which is the longest fault? You can see the names here. Marginal fault. This is also marginal fault only. This is also marginal. Allahabad Island, then Kutch mainland fault. Then we have another one fault here. One fault, Kim fault is there. Like these small things are there. Now, which is the longest fault here?
Marginal fault.
Approximately. Okay, so marginal fault is the longest fault. But so now, what is your assumption? Like you see, whether marginal fault can produce 8 magnitude. Based on the length, it is a possible, right? Because the length is very long, say, you can see it is in degrees. 26 degrees here. You followed it. If you see this grids 26 and 22, approximately 1 degree is 111 kilometers. Okay, so 6 minus 2 means 4 degrees. So almost 400 kilometer is the length of this marginal fault. So 400 kilometer means definitely it can produce 7.5 or 8 magnitude. Okay, but this marginal fault, if you see in the past, so it has not produced any earthquake at all actually. You followed, right? Now, whereas if you see this 2001 earthquakes, that Gujarat earthquake 7.8, it occurred on which fault? Can you identify here? The epicenter is here, so it occurred on which fault? Can you read the name here?
Kutch mainland fault.
Kutch mainland fault. Now you compare the length of Kutch mainland fault and marginal faults. Whose length is more?
Marginal.
So now you may think that marginal fault should produce a 8, because its length is long. But Kutch mainland fault, which has small length, say that produces 8 magnitude actually. You follow, right? So this is a very difficult thing to tell us actually. Okay, so length of the fault long doesn't mean that so there are so many problems are there. Okay, so these empirical relations are there, like based on the length you decide something, but that's very difficult. Maybe later on we will see for India also. Okay, so this problem comes actually. Okay, so this assumption is, as the length of the fault is more, say, then you will see that max of that fault is more, but it is not the other way around also. Okay, these faults would have not even produced any earthquake also, although its length may be 500 kilometers. But if you see the empirical relations, say, of course, as length of the fault increases, mx also increases. But that is the biggest the headache. So what one does is people also find out the slip rate actually. Okay, so this is the most important thing nowadays. Right? All of your mobiles also have that one. What is right? This GPS. All of you have heard, right? In your mobile also, everybody, Uber, Ola, you followed, right? Global position system comes. So what does this GPS gives you?
Gives our location.
So location will be there. So nowadays we have excellent. Now of course these instruments. Once upon a time it was expensive. Now it is very cheap. So now if you spend something around 5 lakh or 6 lakhs, say, you will get a very excellent GPS device which can measure. The because right, Indian plate is moving, the faults are moving. Say, so if you can measure the GPS location, if you can track every a minute or something like that, so right, the whole India plate is moving. You can find out in 5 centimeter per year. You remember I have told you 5 centimeter in a year it has moved, say. So you can find out all this GPS information. So that what we say as a slip rate correlation actually. Okay, so slip rate means suppose if I have a fault, say, they put GPS instruments near the fault, somewhere here they put up. So what these instruments does do is they are very sophisticated GPS, not the GPS which you are using in the mobile. They may not be accurate, but these instruments because atomic clock will be there, some 5 lakhs, they are very expensive instruments. Now what happens, the good thing is so these instruments monitor the fault. So you may have a long fault, you may have a small fault. Say suppose if the fault is very active, say, what will happen to your slip rate? What will happen to that fault? So if the slip rate is more, say, what does it tells you? That fault movement is no.
Fast.
Now the faults are fast means not our bike speed or something like that. In earthquakes, fast means per year only. Okay, so here what happens is you can identify a fault which is a very active fault. Okay, so the meaning is active fault. Okay, so active fault means the faults which are showing some type of a movements, like one slippage, 1 mm, or some kind of a thing, whether it has moved or not. So generally if you see the here, like for example Gujarat, say, okay, if you have put up the GPS instruments near marginal fault, and then you put a GPS instrument near Kutch mainland fault, say, now length of marginal fault may be more, but which instrument will for which slip rate will be more, near marginal or near Kutch mainland? Kutch. Because you see Kutch mainland fault is a it is showing lot of movements basically, so that means it is an active fault itself. So this is also one more thing people use actually. Okay, like GPS they monitor, and then there are some guidelines are there. If a fault is showing a lot of movements, say, then that may produce an earthquake in the future, something like that. If the fault is not showing any movement, say, although its length may be high, so we call as a dormant, or that's a that fault may not produce any earthquake. So like that. So we are having empirical also, we have instrumental also. Okay, so you have to have a balance. You can't go just by this also. Sometimes people may get fooled also. That fault would be showing lot of activity, but it will not produce any 8 magnitude or 7. It will produce only 3 magnitude. That is also useless. Okay, now this also is one way. This is also another version. So you should have a balance between all these approaches. Okay, so that is this. So this is a problem to estimate the maximum the magnitude. So that is a biggest problem. So now, now we have to find out the probability density function actual of the magnitude. So how do we estimate the probability density function? So now obviously, I think in my starting lectures, we already said, like, what is that relation? You remember, any of you? The frequency of earthquakes I showed you in my introductory slides. Earthquake magnitudes, what law they follow? Like magnitude versus number of earthquakes. Say I showed you, right? N. If I take greater than, less than 3, then 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like that I showed you. What was that? It followed what type of law? Now you remember that frequency of earthquakes, whole world I showed you. In the 100 years I showed you. See, like for example, magnitude, power law. Okay, or we also call this as Gutenberg Richter law actually. Okay, so log 10 n, okay, is equal to a minus bm. So already I showed you, right? So if it is greater than 9 magnitudes, say maybe one earthquake will occur in 100 years. Now greater than 8 to 9 something, say you will be having some 15 earthquakes or something. Then 7 to 8, say some 150. As magnitude increases, one digit increase, 15,000, 1,50,000, 15 lakhs, like that it occurs. So if you take a logarithm of this one, so the frequency, so it shows a straight line with magnitude. So this we call as this Gutenberg the Richter law itself. Okay, so low magnitudes, they occur very often. Then the large magnitudes, they occur very rare. The data also supports this type of distributions. So this is the law. So n of m, say the frequency of earthquakes and the magnitude. Okay, so if you plot, say it shows a exponential the distribution kind of a thing. So if you take logarithm, say of this one, then it shows a straight line. Okay, so it will have an intercept, then it also will have a slope basically. So the slope is what we call as a b value, the intercept is this a value itself. Okay, so this is a Gutenberg Richter law. So generally what we do is, we divide this by t, that is a duration actually of the catalogs. Okay, so duration of our earthquake catalogs. Okay, let us say you have collected all the information for last 100 years, say. Okay, the number of earthquakes 100 years. So you divide by 100, say. So then you will get per year or something like that. So it is normalized. So then you can find out, you see, what is the frequency of 6 magnitude in a given year kind of thing. So generally this will be, per year or something like that. You see, we have this log lambda m. Okay, so this is our Gutenberg Richter law itself. Or Gutenberg Richter law is same as what is the it's so the return period. So the reciprocal of lambda. So lambda is total number of earthquakes divided by t. So it is a per year kind of a thing. So reciprocal of lambda will be, what will be the units?
Years.
It will be in years only. And what is the reciprocal of lambda known as? 1 by lambda.
Return period.
I showed you, right, that random variable, geometric random variable, or whatever you remember, we have already discussed here. Now another thing is this lambda, so this frequency of earthquakes. They are following Gutenberg Richter, but what is this? What type of random variable is this? What type of random variable is this? Frequency of earthquakes?
Exponential.
It is exponential random variable. Excellent. Okay. Anyway, exponential random variable is Gutenberg, Richter, all are followed, right? One another only. So now the reciprocal of this lambda, say we call as the return period, or sometimes recurrence also we use. Why we use recurrence is return period. What is the definition of return period? Return period is reciprocal of reciprocal of what?
Frequency of occurrence.
No, be careful.
Probability of exceedance.
Probability of exceedance. Excellent. Okay, so reciprocal of probability is return period. But here, what is a lambda? It is not a probability, right? What is lambda? Lambda is simply how many number of earthquakes have occurred divided by the duration of the catalog only. So of course, this is also frequency only, okay? But sometimes in many textbooks, they goof up the things. So generally, this is also, of course, return period only. But the exact word, if you want to talk perfect mathematical sense, this is known as recurrence period, basically. If you want to, exactly, or recurrence interval or recurrence period also. Like, if you are a strict probability mathematician, say, so then 1 by lambda is not, return period. They say it is a recurrence period. But nowadays in many textbooks, people are not differentiating. So they say return period, recurrence period, all of them are same. But strictly speaking, they are not different. The reason is probability, say. See, like for example, probability, what is the maximum probability you can give? See, what is the maximum probability?
1.
1. But lambda? See, lambda, what happens? What's the maximum value of lambda? So n is the number of earthquakes, okay, for a given magnitude. Let us say 30 lakh earthquakes have occurred, okay, in 100 years, say. What is lambda?
0.3.
So 30 lakhs in 100 years. 30 lakhs
30,000.
divided by 30,000. So what is reciprocal of lambda? Reciprocal of lambda, reciprocal of probability of accidents are the same. Units are same.
No, sir.
Units are same. Both are frequency only. But probability is a mathematical quantity. It lies from 0 to 1. But whereas lambda, if 30 lakh earthquakes in 100 years, say, then 30,000, lambda can be, the maximum can be anything else. So then the lambda, this becomes 1 by 30,000 kind of thing itself. Okay. So this is a very important thing. The difference between recurrence period and return period. Return period is a strict mathematical word, and it comes from the probability. But many textbooks, Kramer or any people nowadays, right? They probability things, people have not understood properly. They use all these words left and right, this way, that way, this way, this way, but both are entirely different, strictly in a mathematical sense. So anyway, so this you should not confuse, okay? So now that's what we said. So Gutenberg-Richter law. So it has an intercept, and then it has this slope, that is, this b. So this side you have lambda, and this side reciprocal. If you see, so you can also find out, like, you can draw, right? MATLAB also, I think log yy, you can plot, 2 y-axis and 1 x-axis also. Okay, just if you want, you can plot also. So this is what you see we call as a Gutenberg-Richter law, and NC, this is defined as number of events greater than or equal to magnitude m. So you have to so to construct this Gutenberg-Richter, you collect all the earthquakes, say. Okay, so collect all the earthquakes. So let us say if I want to do for Ahmedabad, say. So now for Ahmedabad city, what I have to do is, in the past, okay, in the past 100 years or 500 or 1000 or whatever, say. So full catalog has to be around 300 kilometers or maybe 500 kilometers around Ahmedabad city, say. So you have to collect all the data of earthquakes, like, which earthquake, what was the magnitude of the earthquake, where it occurred, what was its distance, and then on what date it has occurred, which year. Essentially months we are not interested, but the year has to be collected. So you collect all the information around your site, say. So now you have to frame a chart, like you see magnitude is here and the frequency. So this is m, okay. So small m greater than or equal to this capital M kind of thing. So if it is a 3 magnitude, say, so how many earthquakes are more than 3 magnitude? Then how many earthquakes are more than 4 magnitude, and how many earthquakes are more than 5, 6, 7, 8, like that, you see it happens. Okay, so this you have to find out here, how many number of earthquakes, say, greater than 8. So if there are 2000 earthquakes around Ahmedabad, say, so how many will be more than 8? Approximately how many will be more than 8 magnitude, and 8 is the maximum, say, how many will be there?
Maybe 1.
Maybe 1. Excellent. Okay, and how many will be more than 3?
Mostly all of them.
Mostly all of them. Okay, so that is a Gutenberg-Richter. So this is what you have to follow. Now to plot this graph, say, what you have to do? So this n has to be divided by what you have to do? You have divided by. Now how do you get lambda?
Divided by duration of earthquake catalog.
So now let us Ahmedabad city, these 2000 events has been observed in last 500 years, say. So this entire thing has to be divided by 500 years actually. Okay, this is how we do. So you just normalize them. Otherwise, to get recurrence interval, other things that is mandatory. Okay, so this we try to do. So NC you find out, then you find out lambda. So lambda is anyway, you have to n and lambda both are same, but you are divided per year kind of thing it becomes. Otherwise, what happens is, what are the units of n? So for n, say what is the units of n? Magnitude, anyway you have a unit, that is a movement magnitude or something we can give, but what is the units of n? N is just a number, number of earthquakes or something. It doesn't have any units. So to create a unit, say we divide by duration, then it becomes per year kind of thing. You see, we will get this one. So sometimes we also write so this is log. Sometimes some people they write logarithm also. There are two logs are there, right? One with base 10, other one with base natural logarithm. Right? This log 10 log e business is there. Sometimes people use log, means see, whenever they use this word logs, it means 10 or e. Any of you remember?
10, sir.
It is with respect to 10. When people write ln,
With respect to
with respect, sometimes people use this, sometimes use this, but strictly following Gutenberg-Richter, log 10 only we use. But some people they use exponent also, log to the power of base e. So of course both are same only. So then instead of a value, b value, so we write alpha beta. So this also you have to be very careful. Alpha beta, if somebody are reporting in any textbook, so that means they have been estimated from natural log, that is e. But whereas a and b, say this corresponds to base 10. Okay, so this is a link between these. You should not get confused. Okay, alpha and beta. So now this is what you see. He has some these. So you can see. So now this is a typical site. So from 4.75 to 5.25. 250 earthquakes are there. Now 5.25 to 5.75, so 140, then 5.75 to 6.25, 78, and then 8.25 to 8.75, 0.6 actual. So these are the numbers. So this is a per 100 years you followed it. He has got this numbers itself, say. Okay, so now you plot this graph. Now here he has given 4.75 to 5.25, 5.25 he has given like a bin kind of a thing. But in Gutenberg-Richter law, n means number of earthquakes is greater than this magnitude m actual. So now if I calculate m greater than, the lowest is 4.75. Now what is the number? Now what is an m greater than 4.75? From this table, which number you have to take? So I want to find out number of earthquakes which have magnitude more than 4.75. How many? What is the number?
Sum all of them.
You have to sum up all of them actually. Now suppose m greater than 8.25, say what is the value?
0.6.
0.6, right? So this you find out 4, 4.75, 5 point whatever you have, and then you nicely plot them basically. Okay, so you can see 10 to the power of somewhere he has got, I think he would have added all these 250, 140 something. So this finally say, so you plot all these points and then you put a graph, you followed it, you draw here and you find out its intercept, and then you find out the slope of the line, say. So this you will get this the Gutenberg-Richter law at this a value and then this b value. Okay, so now I think this is for some you can do for variety of cases. So these I think New Madrid seismic zone, some people have estimated. So you can see, so 8 you followed, right? So these are the numbers. So you can easily estimate, like you see, if you have 1 magnitude, say. One magnitude event, what is how many will occur per year? You can see this number 350. Now 8, more than 8, say. So more than 8, what is the value? Approximately how many will occur in a given year? 0.001 or something. Reciprocal will give me return period or recurrence period. So you can easily find out this will occur some 550 to approximately 1200 years, So you can easily find out from this graphs also, or no need to find out, you substitute in this equation. So if you want to find out for 8 magnitude, the recurrence interval or the return period, say. So you substitute is 3.43 minus 0.88 into 8 magnitude. you will get log NC. So you find out NC and then reciprocal of NC, say you will get your recurrence interval or return period or whatever, of course, if he has divided by capital T, you use that one. Since he has done for NC, say, so then this becomes T by NC, right, that lambda T N are both of them are different. So 1 by lambda only will give you the return period or what. I think he has done only N value, I think. Okay, N he has done. He has not done the division by the total duration of the catalog. So if you can easily find out the return periods and other things also. Okay, so this is what the new Madrid seismic zone say. The how these lines you see looks like. So this is what we said. So now you can do log 10 or log exponent also. So A, alpha, B and beta, both of them are linked to one another because anyway one is base 10, another one is base E logarithm. So this is the relationship actual. Okay, so alpha is 2.30 times A and beta is 2.30 times B. Right, log 10 E I think is 2.303. So this is how it comes. So alpha, beta, A, B, both of them are linked to each other itself, and this is the exponential distribution. So why this link up is required is the Gutenberg-Richter law, when it was proposed by Gutenberg and Richter in the olden days, they used log 10 basically. Okay, but if you see probability theory, say exponential random variable, so an exponential random variable, what you will use it, log 10 or log E in probability theory?
Log E.
Log E we use that, e to the power of like that. So this was a problem, because Gutenberg Richter originally was a 10, but it was a E. So to link up, we had this problem, alpha, beta, and then AB. Now, so now we see, so this is exponential distribution. Now the main problem with Gutenberg Richter law. So what is the main problem with this line? Now, what is the main problem? Can you see here? What is the main problem with this law? It matches with the data, that's a different issue. But what is the problem you can see?
Not valid for larger magnitude.
Not valid for large magnitudes. Okay, maybe you are seeing this line. Okay, I think. Now you tell me by this figure. Okay, that is also agreed what you told is, but what is something more fundamental here? What is some more fundamental problem you have with Gutenberg Richter? What you told is correct only, that is fine, but some more if you look at fundamentally, there is one it's not this one, but there is a problem with this one. What is the problem? It is related to your answer only. See this line, say what has happened to this line? It is a straight line, log 10 n is equal to a minus bm. So this line, whether it has any bounds, see whether this line is valid for all magnitude. So now from the Gutenberg Richter law, it is just a straight line. So now 12 magnitude can occur, 12, 15 magnitude can occur. See, this is just a line, log 10 n is equal to a minus bm. So in that equation, I can substitute this number itself, right? If I substitute m is equal to 15, say, so I will get some answer. So m is equal to 20 magnitude, say, I will get some answer. It may be very low, but what happens? So what's the problem here? What's the problem with Gutenberg Richter? What is the problem with this line?
It is unbounded.
It is unbounded actually. Unbounded means this side also it is not bounded. This side also it is not bounded actually. So what is that you have to do? You have to specify some bounds basically. Okay. So to have more meaning for this Gutenberg Richter law. Otherwise, if you leave this line as it is, say, okay. So now what is the maximum magnitude? This line is just a mathematical formula, right? You can have 20 magnitude, you can have 100 magnitude, you can have 100 also. Anything is possible actually. So you have to create bounds. One bound at this end, one bound is this end. Now this end also, why do you require a bound here at the lower end? So lower end means you can have a 0 magnitude also. Why do we have a bound at the lower end?
Negative
Upper end,
magnitude
it is
are not
understood.
possible.
Tell me.
Negative magnitudes are not possible.
Negative magnet, that is one thing, but in our engineering, say, okay, this is more related to our engineering thing. See, are you interested in 2 magnitude earthquake?
No, sir.
Why?
This will not cause more damage.
Excellent. So we are not interested. 3 magnitude, are you interested? See, what is our engineering? The engineering means we are interested in damage of the structure. Seismologists will be interested in 0.1 magnitude also. That's a different issue. Okay, but for our engineering, so what is the threshold? Like you see, what is the from where you are? We will try to our structures will start vibrating. What is that minimum thing? Any of your idea? What is that minimum magnitude which can cause damage approximately? What is the threshold we use? Just a guess, don't worry.
4 to 5.
Cyber 4.5.
4.5 is okay. That is also perfectly fine. So generally we use 4 to 4.5. You followed. So this is the threshold. So what happens is this Gutenberg-Richter law, it doesn't have bounds, lower bound also, upper bound also. So this is a main problem. So it should have been bounded. So one is at the lower bound. So this is more important for the engineering things also. Not only from that, even from the data point of view also. We have this problem. See, do we have instrument? Can you record 0.1, 0.5 magnitude earthquake? See, 0.5 magnitude, 1 magnitude, 1.5 magnitude, say, whether our instruments can record these type of small things.
Sir.
Whether our instruments can record.
No, sir.
It is very difficult, you followed, right? Instruments also, there are problems are there. It's not that straightforward. So the data may not be accurate and all kinds of problems. So these two bounds has to be decided in the hazard. So this Gutenberg-Richter law, it is as a law, it is perfectly fine. But we have to add the bounds, one at the upper end, other one is at the lower end. So lower end is more or less fine because of engineering judgment, like you say 4 to 4.5. But upper end is a big problem. So what we try to do is in our analysis, we add a lower bound also. So this exponential distribution function, say this exponential distribution is unbounded basically. So there are no bounds for this exponential random variable. So beta e to the power of minus beta m. What we try to do is we put a bound here, m minus m naught actually, and m is more than m naught. So this means is, I will have my distribution like this. So this is my m naught. Okay, so less than m naught, it is undefined kind of a thing, or this is not valid. So this is how we do. So the random variable says. So now this is the the density function for exponential random variable, which is lower bound. So lower bound, if you fix, say, so this is my random variable. So this is slightly modified actually. Instead of this, we do this one beta. So the lower bound has been added. Now similarly, say you should have an upper bound also, because 20, 25 magnitude, it's not possible actually. Okay, so every source has a maximum magnitude, and you have to so this distribution, say this also is useless actually. Okay, the lower bound, you have to add upper bound also. If you want upper bound, say, so this is my the bounded Gutenberg-Richter recurrence law, the lambda. So you have a lower bound, you have an upper bound also. So both of them, you see, we add this bound that is on the other side also. So this is my Gutenberg-Richter law. So you have a lower bound and we have an upper bound. Okay, so this is how it goes. So because we have added the upper bound, say, so that it is not no more a straight line kind of a thing. Of course it is straight line only up to some extent, but after that it becomes slightly curved, and then it just collapses like this. So you cannot have magnitude more than the mx. So that is fixed kind of thing. So this is how we try to do, which we use it in the practice, because Gutenberg-Richter straightforward you can't use it, okay, because it doesn't have bounds. on the upper side as well as the lower side, and magnitude of infinity is also possible actually in the original Gutenberg Richter law. So to avoid that, we put bounds lower side as well as on the upper side. So the bounded law we use. Okay. Then there is also one more the people use is a characteristic earthquakes. It was I don't know, some suddenly it came up. Then it is still debatable. Okay, it's not that it is widely defined or something like that. So this these type of earthquakes are very, very special. Like there are faults. Some even in India also they say, but it is not very well defined. So these faults, what they do is, they will not produce any 3 magnitude, 2 magnitude or anything like that, but they will produce only, like 6 magnitude only they produce, but frequently, they produce like every 100 years they produce 6 magnitude, like that they have. So these type of earthquakes, we call them as, the characteristic, the earthquakes itself. So there are some patterns are there, and they say, right, you see, the Gutenberg Richter laws, basically it will be like this. Okay, but you can see here the probability of getting the maximum value is enhanced. So these earthquakes are like, they produce these earthquakes also, but they have like every 6 magnitude or max say they produce frequently they produce. Even our Gujarat earthquake say that Kutch mainland fault also, some people say that Kutch mainland fault, all that produce 3-4, but it produces every, I think, 200-300 years, say 7.1 magnitude. Okay, so like that also, it does. So this is little bit very tricky. It's a very, very difficult thing in hazard analysis. A characteristic earthquake recurrence loss. So what we try to do is the maximum magnitudes, say we enhance its probability. It is increased. Okay, because these earthquakes are very special kind of thing itself. So now I am just showing you. So I will send you my paper also, article, you see. So we have done, I'm collecting the data, say, like you see, Bombay, Chennai, all the cities basically, this around 300 kilometer radius. So I have my city around 300 kilometer radius. I collect all the seismicity data, say, and then fit a Gutenberg Richter law, not unbounded Gutenberg Richter law. We do a unbounded, bounded Gutenberg Richter law. So the curves, they look like this. The lowest thing is, Chennai. You can see here. So this is the lowest graph is Chennai here. You followed. Then the highest one, say, that is the simple dotted line. What is the dotted line? I'm unable to recollect. Now, so Bombay is somewhere here. Then we have a Solapur or something is here. Then we have, you see, Madurai or something, or you follow, right? So these are the numbers here. Now you tell me what is the most important thing you can observe now. Which city has more dangerous, or which is more active, seismically active? So which is more seismically active here? See, suppose here, it is very Nasik, say. If I take Nasik, Max is very high actually. You follow, right? More than compared to other places itself. But if you see the frequency of occurrence, let us say 6.5, which is more dangerous. Now, so if I take 6.5 magnitude, say, among all the places in South India, important cities, which city there is a more chance? Solapur, you followed. Now, you can do, these Gutenberg Richter law will tell you now in peninsular India, say, which is most dangerous place. Nasik is fine. You can have large magnitude, but their frequency is very, very small. You can see Nasik is here, this line basically. So the frequency of occurrence is, say, all the Max is high, but the graph is like this. So which is the most the safest city or unsafest city? You can easily, this is like a first hand information, you can easily identify from this graph. So which is the most safest city in South India?
Chennai.
So that is but we are sitting in safest city, but we are doing research in earthquakes. Okay, anyway. So this is a more followed it. So you can easily identify the safest cities. Now you can see this is also Vijayawada. You can see here. So this place is, what's the advantage of Vijayawada? Although frequency something is there, but what is its max? No. See, Vijayawada, so what is the max approximately?
5.7.
5.7 or 5.8 it says. So for Chennai, what is the max?
Around 5.9.
5.9, but of course this is a 300 kilometer radius actual. Okay, so this so the Gutenberg Richter laws, although it is a very simple, just a straightforward thing, but you can get lot of insight actual. So you can identify which are the most dangerous places, or which are the most seismically active places, which are highly seismic active, this one. So this gives you a first cut feeling basically. Okay, so which is the most dangerous place and other things also. So this is, I think, almost all the cities I'm showing you here in the entire India, all urban cities. So 300 kilometer radius around, say. Okay, so you collect all the data and then you fit a Gutenberg Richter bounded law, not unbounded law. And now you tell me which is the most dangerous city in India. So the most dangerous is among all the important urban cities in India, say. So the most dangerous is which one? Guwahati, you can see. Next comes so Srinagar comes here. Then we have Patna. Then Delhi is here. You can see. And what is the MX? Can you see here MX? So you can have 8.8. That is the the MX here. So Delhi, if you see, say, so Delhi, around the Delhi also, you have, this is a Delhi city you followed, right? MX can be this one, but frequency is very low. So you can see Guwahati, Srinagar, then Patna, then the Delhi. And what is the most safest city? No, Vizag was here, Visakhapatnam. Oh, it was not there here. Okay, fine. So which is the most safest, or where the frequency of earthquakes are very, very low?
Visakhapatnam.
Vizag or Raipur, you followed, right? The frequencies are very, very low or something like that, you followed, right? So you can easily identify all these kinds of the issues actual. Okay, so this is a very interesting thing. So Gutenberg Richter laws, all that is very simple, but it can give you a nice information about the occurrence of earthquakes, so to identify the region. So this also, see, sometimes what happens is this threshold, say, we have said, right, you can take some 4 to 4.5 or something. Automatically Gutenberg Richter law also we can estimate. So this is you take all the data, say, around Delhi city or Bombay or something, you collect all the things. What happens is, if you plot the number of earthquakes more than m, and then so the Gutenberg Richter law also goes like this. So here so the where the slope changes, say, so this also we call this as the m naught basically. Okay, so this is also one way to fix this one, because the data it is very difficult to record the low magnitude earthquakes 2.5, because our instruments cannot catch this type of thing. So what does it means, Gutenberg Richter law, if it is straight, what does it means? So the number of earthquakes more than 2.5 and n 3 magnitudes, say. What is your comment for 2.5 and 3? How many number of earthquakes are more than 2.5? How many number of earthquakes are more than 3, say? What is your comment by looking at this figure?
Equal.
They are same. That means your 3 magnitude, 2.5, both are having same actual. But our Gutenberg Richter law, what does it tells you? As magnitude is decreasing, say, the frequency should be
Increase.
see that straightly the Gutenberg Richter law, this is the line. So honestly, you followed it. If you want to plot, so this line should be like this actually. You followed. So the line should be like this. But because frequency of this should be very high compared to this one, but data also doesn't support, and we have a problem here. And because instruments can't catch these low magnitudes, so that's why we fix the threshold somewhere 4 to 4.5 or something like that, or 3.5 onwards. The instruments work fine, but to fit a straight line, we do this way, and then fit this type of Gutenberg Richter laws. Okay. So this also we can do. Then other thing, the most important thing is the completeness period also. Okay, this is a completeness interval also we try to do. Like you see, if you collect all the data, so this is also another important challenge. obtaining A value, B value, although it appears to be very easy, but there are so many issues are there. So like in our India, say, when earthquake catalogs will come, this instrumental data is available for how many years in the past? So how many years the data is available? So like for example, Chennai, around Chennai city, say. So how many, the earthquake information is available from what years in the past approximately? Around any city in India. How many years it will be there? When instruments started coming into picture? When instruments have started coming into picture?
It's the
1800s.
late 90s.
No, our don't see, look at this graph. This graph is only to fool you, okay? This graph is a different issue. But generally all the seismic instruments are the magnitude concept, all these things came from which year? You remember that Richter magnitude, I showed you, right? 1930 or 1934, something around like that. But in India, when instruments people have bought and then when they have installed, so somewhere around 1960 or you followed, right? Around that time only the instruments are available, basically around 1960 or something instruments came. But now to estimate the earthquake catalog, say, see what happens in our India, you have to estimate all the past information, you have to collect it, because we are talking about written periods 1,000 years or whatever, you have to collect. But in our India, what happens is we have lot of the historical information also. You followed it, lot of historical the information is there, okay? Lot of historical information, like right, in our India, we have a lot of kings are there, all Akbar Nama, Babar Nama, they also used to write their autobiography. So there they used to mention all the earthquakes, so all kinds of information was there. So the history and so the historical informations, if you collect, we have lots of informations are there, okay? Like 400 AD, 600 AD, there is a lot of earthquakes are there. So you can collect all the information from the historical things. But the history remembers what type of earthquakes? See, the history remembers what type of earthquakes or what type of things history remembers?
Dangerous.
Dangerous, that means large magnitudes only. See, there has been I don't know how many of you, maybe I will send you one paper also. You see, like there are some historical things I will send you, like this Akbar Nama, I think Babar or somebody, there something has been written, like something around 1500 AD, say, before Taj Mahal was built, okay? So it is nicely mentioned there was a huge earthquake in Agra, so they have described, like you see, horses was there and then the buildings collapsed, so they have given a lot of the informations. So around 1500 AD, say, there is we can easily identify that this earthquake has occurred during 1500 AD. Suppose 4 magnitude, 5 magnitudes, people doesn't feel, so they don't report this type of earthquakes at all, okay? So like this also we have a huge information we have. So if you collect all the informations around Delhi or any city, say, we have historical information, then so we have lots of information, historical, then instrumental things, okay? So these instrumental things are there, and nowadays like forensic sciences, right? Like in the forensic things, they say, like once a murder or something has happened, say, they find out when this has happened and all other things. So we have what we call as forensic seismology also, okay? Forensic seismology or paleoseismology. So this is the subject, paleoseismology, where they dig the trenches, they identify the all the things, and then they do carbon dating, and lot of papers have been published by geologists and others, okay? So luminescence, they use all kinds of techniques, so informations are available. So generally, if you take any site around any city in India or any place in the world, you will have historical information which is only about large earthquakes. Then we have instrumental information only from 1960 onwards. Then we have forensic or the paleo information also will be there. So now you have to club all these the informations here. So if you mix all these information, so what is the problem you will see here? Yeah, history remembers only
Large earthquake.
large earthquakes only, but instrumental thing, From 1964 onwards, say when you have put up an instrument, what happens? You will have information on
Small earthquakes.
small earthquake, large earthquakes also, everything, all the information will be there. So your data say it is something like several parts, like instruments, then historical thing, so historical things doesn't have small low magnitude, instrumental things has all magnitudes. Paleo means that's a different issue. So when you mix up all the data and then try to fit a straight line, what happens? See, can you mix all this information and try to fit a straight line? So if you try to plot this Gutenberg-Richter law, this information, so the low magnitudes is controlled by the instrumental region, but higher magnitudes, say you have instrument also, but historical information also, it controls this portion of the curve. So if you try to mix these two, say, then you have a serious problem will come into picture. So there are several tests are there, like you see cumulative frequency or steps method, we say completeness test. Okay, so the completeness test for the data. So generally, whenever you have a data, say this is a very mandatory to before Gutenberg-Richter say. So you have to find out, the catalog whether it is a complete or incomplete, or if you are having goof up of all kinds of information, say. So how do we sort out? So this we do like one steps method actually. Okay, so this is just a statistical technique, or a cumulative technique also. You plot all the cumulative number of events where the slope gets changed, say. So that is what they could take it as a completeness interval or something like that also. So you have to group up all the magnitudes, like you see 8 to 8.9, 4 to 4.9, like that. You group all the number of earthquakes and then you plot their number and this with respect to times, and you plot a straight line. It tells you, the completeness information. Like this is for the 4 to 4.5. It shows this is the range it shows actually. Okay, so this is the range. Now suppose if it is this region, say, so it shows this is the one, then that is the next one, then this is this place, okay, where it crosses the straight line, then you have this information also. Now 4 to 4.9, say the data is complete for 4 to 4.9 for how many years? This is a 10 years, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years actual. So you can easily identify from the graph, statistical technique. So this is 70, 80 years, then this is 100 years, 110 years, or 200 years here, 300, 400, 500 years, like that you can identify. So what does it tells you? So for 4 to 5 magnitude, say, so data is complete only for how many years? Only in the last 60 years only. Let us say this is a 2020, say. Okay, so you subtract 60, say. Okay, so data is complete for and 60 years a time period only. But when you go for 5 to 5.9, say, so then your span, you see, increases. Now for large magnitudes, the span will be very high. Why? So for large magnitudes, they will be complete for 500, 600, 700 years also. What is the reason? You have to speak loud. I am unable to hear. Historical things gets added up actually, and history remembers the large magnitude. So the large magnitudes, the good thing is history remembers them. We will have their dates and magnitudes, but small magnitudes history doesn't remember, only instruments remember. So this we have a problem. So if you want to fit a Gutenberg-Richter law, if you have a catalog, you have to do all these statistical tests. Okay, whether you are, since you are mixing up all kinds of information, so you will have a problem. So this is one issue which you have to sort out before estimating the this itself. Okay, so that is our probability density function for magnitude. So you sort out all these things, then you fit the A value, B value, you follow, right, and then get this parameters, A value, B value, you followed, right? All those things you have to get it out. So PM of M is done. So what is the probability density function for magnitude? What type of random variable is magnitude?
Exponential.
So this is so we assume them to be exponential, but it is not exponential. It is exponential only, but you are having what is that you have added here? Now for exponential random variable, what is that we have added there? Exponential is like
Lower
this.
bound.
So we have a bounded, basically truncated also, people call them. Now the probability density function for a distance, there is no density function. It is all numerically you have to do. Now the last one is this probability. So for a given magnitude and distance, say from the GMPA, you have to find out probability that y will be greater than y star. So this is very easy because PGA is what type of random variable? PGA, spectral, they are what type of
Log
random?
normal.
They are log normal, but log PGA?
Normal.
Normal random variable. So log y, if you take, say it is a normal random variable, so this if you plot with respect to distance for magnitude, so this is a curve for some m star magnitude, say. Now if you fix m and r, say, so this is the mean value basically. So the mean value is given by the figure itself. But since the error is assumed to be normal, say, so you have this normal distribution also, so you can easily find out probability of y greater than y star for a given m and r using the area under this curve actual. So this is a straightforward. So we assume, so three probabilities, say, okay. So one is, so this you can assume it to be a normal random variable, and you can estimate this probability also. Okay, so this you can find out. So y greater than y star, say, for a given m and r, so you can find out from this curve. So if y star is here, say, so this is the area under this the normal distribution. Okay, so this is anyway straightforward. You see the standard normal table, most of you you would have used in previously also. Okay, so this is how we find out all the three probabilities. So I will just now so now you followed it. So this is my hazard curve here. So three probabilities are there. So PR of R, and then you see PM of M, and then you see P SA greater than Y star for given M and R. So these are the three probabilities basically. Okay, so this is a numerical, numerically we do. So this is our exponential random variable, but it is a truncated. And this is a normal random variable. Okay, so these three you have to find out actually. So once you know all these three, say, then you sum up for all possible combinations, so you will get my hazard you followed it, the curve itself. Okay, so this is how we obtain all these numbers also. Okay, so this is how we obtain all these numbers itself. Once you get all these things here, so now we also do this temporal uncertainty, which comes from the Poisson distribution. But anyway, we will cover this in our next class. Okay, so fine. So if you have any questions, you can ask me.